Everything we do, we always ask ourselves, is it going to make KYRIE better? Sup, ULSUM? Hi, I'm Ben, designer of KYRIE 5, and today we're going to talk about 5 things on the KYRIE 5. The first one would be the latest and greatest innovation for KYRIE, which is the Air Zoom Turbo. With this one, if you look at it, the KYRIE 1 had this airbag, and now with the KYRIE 5, we've improved on that, not in terms of scale, but also innovation. With this one, it's no longer just a flat bag like how we were. It now actually has grooves welded in to create more of a curve to the bag so that it mimics the outsole shape. So KYRIE can bang and be quick on the court. And here's some earlier prototype sketches of the bag. We work with our inline innovation team to come up with a design for the bag. The way the channels are welded is because when you want to have flexibility and also curve the bag so that's optimal for KYRIE. The reason why we made the airbag bigger is because we want to cover a lot of the forefoot area where there's a lot of curvature, and he's banking in all different corners. We're engaging in different zoom areas and broadening that size. I think the biggest challenge was creating a process to weld the channels to flex the airbag. That was a challenge that took our engineering team a long time to finalize and engineer. This process actually is a process used to trim off the edges. Now that process is used to weld the flex groove. Essentially, we had to modify existing machines to do something new and different. The second thing is the design process. Again, we started with the innovation for this one, which is the Nike Air, the Zoom Air Turbo. What inspired some of the language was also the tattoo on his arm of the Hamza hand. So that language really transcended throughout the entire shoe. Not only the flex groove of the bag, but also some sketches around the outsole pattern, because grip is really important for KYRIE. We want to make sure that that's been dialed. But from a language standpoint, we want to make sure that it ties in with the innovation of the shoe, which is the Zoom bag. And then we started looking at how that can transcend as well along the upper, so that the shoe all feels holistic and not just detached from one another. Just looking at how there's connection between KYRIE and the fly trap. We want to use that as a locking mechanism for support. So the fly trap feels like it's hugging and contracting around the foot. That's the idea around like why we added a big strap that goes across the forefoot to make sure that there's this clamshell fit to complement the bag that's on the bottom of the foot. With this one, we just looked at fit and getting after a better fit for the 5. KYRIE's already been playing in the 5 at practice, and the reception from him has been a really good positive shoe. The third thing we're talking about is the heel counter with the all-seeing eye graphic. We're going back and forth on deciding where to place this graphic, and it just made sense that it was more of a heel story because there's something about having that placement just fits right on the shoe, and also something about like having eyes behind his head and you can see the court vision a little better than the rest on the court. We thought it was kind of cool to have it there. So the fourth thing is prototyping phase. At this point, we were starting mocking up how the fly trap will come about, just developing where the placement is and how it's going to fit across the foot. Here's some early concepts with that where you see it's still kind of rough. Initially, it was just a floating device, and then we decided that it was better suited if it's attached and become part of the upper, and then it became more something like this. This is an earlier prototype where now you start to see the fly trap integrated with the upper in a different fashion. Here's more of a suede finish. This one was actually right after this guy. We kind of came here where it starts to feel more finished. Even though this is a printed part, it's not real. But the top line was still giving us unrefined detail. So we want to make sure that we finish that proper. That led to something more like this along here, with the top line being revised and the swoosh angle being a little more adjusted. This swoosh angle right here, we had an early prototype where it was a lot more angled towards the midsole and it's more of a steep take on the swoosh. Final version finished off being more on the quarter panel, so more on the upper and less overlapping the midsole, and also changing the angle so it's a lot more traditional as opposed to being something that's steep like this. And also the finishing of the swoosh, the texture on here has these micro little blades on it, so it really makes the shoe feel a little faster, even though there's minutiae details, this micro detail, the swoosh being textured that way. This concept, we gave Taco creative license to create something drastically different than what we have in the line. And Taco wanted to see a really, really big swoosh that is tucked underneath the Venus flytrap, and then it wraps around the shoe and comes around to the medial side. And that was something that we saw was like, wow, that's very different than the rest of them. It's kind of cool. Even like how the flytrap is sunken into the swoosh. That's something that we can see coming. So the fifth thing we're going to talk about is the outsole, which is the very important feature for KYRIE. Like one of the most, the first thing that touches the floor is the outsole. We went through a different iteration where this one had more of a foam podular look, so like these look more independent and there's foams around it. But after a few test rounds of players playing in it, there were some minor issues with it and we didn't feel comfortable moving forward with that. And then we switched out to more of this, where there's still reeds of pods, but we closed up the foam that were exposed and kept it all rubber. We've tested this version, it tested well, but from a visual standpoint, this still reads a little disruptive, and also there are some parts of the shoe that still can be improved from a traction standpoint. That ultimately led to this version. So the direction of the blades has now been rearranged, and also the scale and the gap between each one of them are spaced differently than the one before. The first prototype exposed more of the zoom from the bottom. We just felt that by doing that, you're removing elements of grip in that area, which the shoe still would have performed well. We just felt like we didn't want to sacrifice any sort of performance attributes by having a window versus more of a closed up version. The finalized version still have a window to reveal the bag, but we wanted to make sure that grip was not compromised because of a design change. I mean, just want to get back into like, hey, everything started with this in terms of innovation. Like we wanted to make sure that the Air Zoom Turbo is our hero and that everything else came from this, from a design standpoint. Even like just how things were thought through. Like, I mean, this is like a sandal, but the bag is here and then this covers that area. So this work all together versus being things that add on top of each other. So that was thought through, and in the end, like this is like an echo of the bag from a top view standpoint. You look through an X-ray, that's what the bag shape is like. Same for this language here. So everything started with the innovation of this guy. So that wraps up the 5 things about KYRIE. Hopefully you guys pick up a pair sooner than later and try them out, and I hope that you guys love them.